The shuttle descended through the shimmering haze surrounding Veltrix Institute, its hull glowing faintly from the station's atmospheric re-entry field. Students of 100 species gathered on the landing platform, their eyes fixed on the diplomatic vessel marked with the insignia of Earth's fledgling galactic exchange program. They whispered in hushed clicks, hums, and pulses. The first human was arriving, and no one knew what to expect. Inside the shuttle, Lyra Hale sat with her hands folded tightly on her lap. She kept her breathing steady, a habit drilled into her from childhood. She knew the looks that awaited her. Humans were classified as Class 4 Deathworlders, and the galaxy had not yet decided whether that meant dangerous or unfortunate. Lyra hoped she wouldn't force them to choose. When the ramp extended and the warm metallic scent of Veltrix air swept in, she stepped forward. Conversations died instantly. Her height was average by human standards, but to the slender, fragile species around her, she looked carved from something heavier and older. Her dark hair tied into a loose braid, her posture straight, her expression controlled. A tall, crystalline figure approached, its limbs thin as glass rods. Lyra Hale, it chimed, its voice like vibrating crystal. I am Selvar, your orientation guide. Please follow. Maintain manageable movements. Lyra nodded. She had already been briefed: move slowly, avoid sudden reflexive gestures, speak calmly, and never demonstrate strength unless directed. Inside the main hall, the weight of the alien stairs pressed on her from all sides. The institute was beautiful, towering obsidian pillars, floating hollow screens, the faint hum of translation arrays, but she barely had time to appreciate it. Students parted around her as if she carried radiation. Headmaster Zevril Jean awaited her at the end of the hall. His pale carapace gleamed under the lights, and his 6 eyes blinked in slow, deliberate sequence. Authority radiated from every angle of his posture. Human. He didn't use her name. You stand in an institution of order. You must understand our caution. Lyra kept her voice level. I'm here to learn, Headmaster. I'll follow all school protocols. He tilted his head. We have designed additional rules for you. Protective measures. For others, and potentially for yourself. A holodisplay flickered between them: restricted zones, movement limits, mandatory supervision, prohibition of physical contact. Lyra's stomach tightened, but she kept her response neutral. Understood. Zevril's gaze lingered on her as if waiting for a wrong move. When she gave him none, he gestured for the instructors to escort her to her dormitory. By midday, her existence had become a spectacle. Students trailed her at a distance, pointing out the density of her bones, the rumored explosiveness of her reflexes, the survival adaptations that made humans infamous. She felt like a museum exhibit, interesting, but better behind glass. In her first class, she selected the far edge of the room to avoid crowding anyone. The instructor, a floating orb of bioluminescent tissue named Professor RHYN, dimmed its lights at her presence. We request that the human refrain from startling responses during demonstrations, RHYN announced uneasily. I'm not easily startled, Lyra answered. That, murmured a student, is exactly the concern. During a practical xenobiology lesson, a containment pod unexpectedly sputtered. The energy field flickered around a volatile specimen. Students recoiled. Lyra reacted instinctively, stepping forward, sealing the pod's manual clamps before it destabilized. The room froze. Professor RHYN's voice trembled. You moved 12 meters in under a second. I just acted, Lyra replied quietly. Anyone would. No, the entire class whispered in unison. Rumors spread faster than the truth. That evening, Lyra noticed the shift. Conversation ceased when she passed. Doors slid shut quicker. Even drones avoided flying near her. Still, she tried to settle into her routine. She cooked her own meals in her dorm alcove. Alien food was nutritious but tasted like cold seaweed and bitter metal. She read academy protocols. She practiced slow breathing exercises to quell her restlessness. Yet tension thickened with every passing hour, as though the campus waited for her to prove their fears right. The incident happened on her third day. Lyra entered the engineering wing for an introductory assessment. A cluster of students worked around a miniature energy core as part of a practical project. One of them, a broad-shelled Karathan named Vesker, kept glancing at her with narrowed eyes. When the instructor stepped away, Vesker nudged the stabilizer plate with his elbow. The core flickered violently. Several students cried out as sparks leapt from the exposed conduit. The core began overheating fast. Lyra didn't think, her instincts surged. She grabbed a thermal barrier panel and slammed it over the conduit, wrenching the emergency seal shut before the core could rupture. A blast that would have burned through delicate alien skin barely singed her fingertips. It was enough. Vesker stumbled backward dramatically. She attacked the core, he shouted. She destabilized it. That's a lie, Lyra said sharply, but the damage was done. Students scrambled away, fear racing like wildfire. Security alarms blared. Instructor drones swept in. Within minutes she was surrounded by the Academy's disciplinary staff, armored, stern, and unmistakably afraid. Headmaster Zevril arrived with hurried steps. "Human, you have violated safety protocols." "I prevented an explosion," Lyra argued. "Ask the others." But the students, shaken and intimidated, avoided her gaze. Some whispered that she had caused the malfunction. Others muttered that no alien could have reacted that fast without premeditation. Zevril's mandibles clicked in cold judgment. "Your justification will be evaluated later. For now, we must ensure you pose no immediate threat." Four disciplinary instructors stepped forward, each gripping suppression restraints, bands that tighten with grav pressure, designed for high-risk species. Lyra's chest tightened. She raised her palms slowly. "Please," she said, voice low, steady. "Don't touch me. Human reflexes aren't like yours. If you restrain me, my body might react before I can stop myself." The lead instructor scoffed. He was a muscular Dravari, towering above her, scales gleaming. A warning from a child? His pupils narrowed. "Do not insult us." "It's not a threat," Lyra replied. "It's biology." Zevril waved dismissively. "Restrain her." The room dimmed as the suppression field activated. A low hum filled the air, pressing against her like an unseen hand. Sweat prickled along her spine. She tried to steady her voice. "Please listen. This is a mistake." The instructors advanced. She felt her pulse accelerate. A deep, ancient instinct coiled inside her: survive, move, defend. Muscles tightened involuntarily. Breath shortened. The gravity in the room thickened as they powered up the restraints. "Hold her," the lead instructor ordered. Hands reached for her wrists. Lyra flinched, not out of fear, but because her body was preparing to counter a threat faster than conscious thought allowed. And in that split second before contact, she knew. If they touched her, everything she'd tried to hide would break free. The room vibrated with the hum of power. The instructors stepped closer. Lyra whispered, barely audibly, "Don't do this." They didn't listen. And the restraints opened with a metallic hiss. The moment they touched her would change the Academy forever. The restraints snapped around Lyra's wrists with a hard metallic click. Cold grav pressure surged through the bands, tightening instantly. The suppression field expanded across the room, thickening the air until breathing felt like pushing through syrup. Every alien present relaxed slightly, believing the gravtech would immobilize her like any other dangerous species. They had no idea how human biology responded to restraint. Lyra gasped as the first wave of pressure hit her nervous system. It wasn't pain, more like the jolt before a fall, the instant when instincts take over and the body shifts into survival mode. Her muscles tightened in a reflex she couldn't control. "I warned you," she whispered. The lead instructor, Dravari, scaled and confident, smirked as he stepped closer. This level should hold her. But he had miscalculated. The suppression field jumped from 4 gravs to 6. The average student would have collapsed instantly. Lyra's knees bent slightly, then steadied. Her pulse sharpened, her vision sharpened further, her hearing stretching into perfect clarity. She could pick out every panicked breath around her. A second instructor activated the restraints neural dampeners. A painful buzz crawled across her skin. Lyra clenched her teeth. It triggered a deeper reflex, older than thought, older than language. "Stop. You don't understand what this does to me," she said, voice strained. Silence. The Dravari pressed a final control pad. Increased to 8 gravs. The field surged. Something inside Lyra snapped into place. Not rage. Not aggression. Pure, unfiltered survival instinct. Her heart rate doubled. Blood chemistry shifted. Strength flooded her limbs, an eruption of energy her species evolved over millennia of being hunted by predators larger, faster, and deadlier than any general-world creature could imagine. The instructors didn't see the change, only the tremor in her shoulders. They mistook it for weakness. "Restraints secure," the Dravari announced. "Prepare containment." Lyra whispered, "Please move back." He stepped closer instead. The moment his hand reached toward her shoulder, her reflexes ignited. 5 seconds. That was all it took. Second one. The grav-field around her buckled. Not because she broke it, but because her sudden micro-movement disrupted the generators. The air cracked like shattered glass. "What?" an instructor gasped. Second 2. Lyra twisted instinctively. The restraint bands strained, metal whining, their internal servos fighting against her muscles. The suppression field flickered, then dimmed. "Impossible," someone whispered. Second 3. The bands snapped. Not dramatically, just a sharp, efficient break, like brittle twigs. The grav-field destabilized. Flashing red lines zigzagged across the floor as emergency systems failed. Alarms screamed. Second 4. The Dravari lunged in panic, but Lyra's reflex kicked in again. She sidestepped without thinking, and he flew past her, stumbling into a support pillar. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs, but Lyra hadn't touched him, she simply moved out of his path faster than he could track. "Fall back," another instructor shouted. His voice cracked. Second 5. The entire suppression grid collapsed. Panels popped open overhead. Lights burst in showers of sparks. Instructors were thrown backward by the field's collapse, skidding across the floor. Lyra stood at the center, trembling. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She wasn't attacking anyone, she was fighting her own body, trying to throttle back the instincts roaring through her veins. Her voice shook when she spoke. "I didn't mean," my body reacted. "I tried to stop it." But her explanation drowned under panic. Instructors scrambled away, some dragging their wounded. One clutched his broken restraints, staring at her as though he'd seen the edge of a predator's maw. "She shattered Class 7 bands," he whispered. "No species can do that." "She did," another hissed. "And she barely moved." The Dravari staggered upright, leaning on a pillar, gasping. She was calm. She didn't attack. She just broke free. "Call emergency lockdown," someone shouted. But before they could activate it, the doors slid open with a sharp hiss. Headmaster Zevrel stepped in. His 6 eyes widened at the wreckage, broken restraint parts scattered across the floor, instructors groaning, scorch marks on the walls, the collapsed suppression grid. Then his gaze landed on Lyra. She stood perfectly still. Hands at her sides. Shoulders tense. Eyes lowered. A trembling line of sweat curved along her jaw. "What have you done?" Zevrel asked. His voice was quiet, too quiet. Lyra swallowed, kept her breathing controlled. "You ordered them to restrain me." My reflexes took over. I tried to stay still. I tried to warn them. Zevrel stepped closer, studying her like a scientist examining a volatile element. You expect me to believe this destruction was involuntary? Lyra lifted her gaze. Yes. The instructors muttered in agreement, some reluctantly, others honestly terrified. She didn't strike anyone, one said. She moved too fast. The field failed. Everything failed. Another pointed to the shattered metal cuffs. These were not torn apart. They were snapped cleanly. We've never seen anything like it. Zevral's mandibles twitched. Doubt cracked across his stern expression. Yet pride kept him from yielding. You should have complied, he said. This chaos is the result of your species' uncontrollable nature. Lyra exhaled slowly. Her voice softened. I did comply. I stood still. But the moment you activated those restraints, you triggered my survival instincts. Humans aren't built like your species. When threatened physically, our bodies respond faster than conscious thought. Stronger than intention. Zevral scoffed. A convenient excuse. It's not an excuse, she replied. It's our biology. One of the injured instructors suddenly shouted, she's telling the truth. All eyes turned. The Dravari, still leaning against the pillar, forced himself upright. He faced Zevral with trembling breath. She warned us. Multiple times. We ignored her. She didn't attack. She moved because she had to. He gestured to the demolished suppression grid. She was holding back. If she hadn't, none of us would still be standing. Silence rippled through the room. Lyra's voice remained gentle, controlled. I'm not your enemy. I came here to learn. But you can't treat humans like any other species. Our instincts, they override everything. Zevral's eyes shifted between her and his injured staff. His pride fought the evidence. He wanted to label her a threat, a weapon, but the truth stood before him, quiet and trying desperately not to shake. What happens next, Zevral said, will be decided by a council review. Lyra nodded. Then let me speak at it. He blinked, surprised. Why? Because I don't want this happening again, she said. Not to me. Not to anyone here. For the first time, a few instructors looked at her with something other than fear, something closer to respect. Zevral's voice hardened. You will remain confined to quarters until the hearing. You will not leave. I understand, Lyra replied. But as she turned to exit with the escort drones, every alien in the room felt the same unsettling truth. They hadn't restrained a human. They had provoked a Deathworlder, and survived only because she allowed it. And that realization shook the Academy far more than the destruction left behind. Lyra spent the night confined in a small observation chamber, no restraints, just a silent room with a single hollow window overlooking the campus. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, hands clasped, doing everything she could to keep her mind steady. Her breathing exercises helped, but the memory of the restraint field still hovered behind her eyes. The moment it activated, she'd felt her body drag her into a place she hated, pure instinct, pure reaction. By morning, the quiet was broken by the chime of the door and a pair of escort drones hovering inside. Lyra Hale, one announced, the council is assembled. She stood calmly. Take me. The hall they led her to was larger than she expected. Tiered seating, shaped like a rising spiral, surrounded a circular floor. Representatives from multiple species filled the chamber. Some watched with curiosity, others with fear. A few avoided looking at her altogether. Headmaster Zevral stood at the center, rigid and composed, though his mandibles twitched with restrained tension. Around him, the injured disciplinary instructors sat under medical shields, still recovering from the suppression grid's collapse. Lyra walked into the center with slow, deliberate steps. A hush fell over the hall. A council official, a tall Kethri with translucent skin, spoke first. We are here today to discuss the events that occurred in the engineering wing. Lyra Hale, you may begin with your account. Lyra nodded. I came to this academy to learn. To show that humans can coexist with other species without conflict. I followed every instruction. I kept my movements controlled. I avoided anything that could be misinterpreted. Her voice remained steady. What happened yesterday was not aggression. It was a survival response triggered by the Academy's suppression technology. Some council members murmured. Others leaned forward. Lyra continued, when the restraints activated, they overloaded my nervous system. Humans evolved under constant threat. When physically restricted, our instincts override conscious control. It isn't intentional. It's biology. A thin-limbed Trelvan scoffed, are we to accept that your species simply loses control when touched? Lyra met his gaze. I didn't lose control. I was forced into a state designed for emergencies. My body did what it was shaped to do, survive. The hall fell quiet again. One of the injured instructors, the Dravari who had dismissed her warnings, raised a weakened hand. She's telling the truth. His voice was rough but firm. We triggered the response ourselves. We overrode her protests. She didn't attack any of us. We were thrown because the suppression field collapsed. His statement rippled through the room. Several representatives exchanged glances. A counselor clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. Lyra Hale, if we accept your explanation, then the responsibility lies with the Academy for provoking this incident. Is this your claim? Lyra shook her head. I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm here to prevent this from happening again. She looked directly at Zevril. Your systems aren't built for species like mine. They were never meant to. Instead of treating humans like threats, you need to understand how we work. Zevril's eyes narrowed. And why should we adapt to accommodate a species known for unpredictability? Because unpredictability isn't danger, Lyra answered. Ignorance is. A quiet gasp rose in the chamber. She didn't raise her voice, her tone remained almost soft, but the weight behind the words rang through every tear. The Ketheri counselor addressed Zevril. Headmaster, it seems your team acted without proper understanding. Why were additional restraints deemed necessary without a biological assessment? Zevril stiffened. Humans are classified as high risk. The student displayed unnaturally rapid reflexes. My decision was to ensure safety. And yet, the counselor replied, your decision created the danger. The headmaster's pride strained against the evidence piling around him. 6 of his staff injured. A destroyed suppression grid. A human girl standing calmly before them, clearer and more composed than any of the aliens accusing her. Lyra took a step forward. Headmaster, I warned your instructors. I told them not to touch me. I told them what would happen. I wasn't trying to threaten anyone. I was trying to stop this. Zevril finally spoke directly to her, his tone clipped. Why didn't you simply allow yourself to be restrained? Lyra answered truthfully. Because I couldn't. My body reacted before I even understood what was happening. If I had fought back intentionally, this room wouldn't be big enough to hold the consequences. Several council members stiffened, realizing she wasn't boasting, she was reminding them of the truth they kept avoiding. The council murmured among themselves. Finally, the Ketheri raised a hand for silence. This academy failed to understand the nature of the student it admitted. The responsibility lies with its leadership. A disbelieving murmur swept through the crowd. Lyra inhaled deeply. I'm not asking for punishment. I just want recognition that humans shouldn't be treated like unstable weapons. We can adapt, but so must you. The Ketheri turned toward Zevril. Headmaster, the council recommends that you issue a formal apology, revise the safety protocols, and ensure that no species is subjected to inappropriate restraint. Zevril froze. His pride fought for dominance. But the pressure of 100 watching eyes, the clear facts, and the unavoidable public record left no room to hide. Slowly, very slowly, he lowered himself to one knee. The hall went silent. His mandibles clicked once before he spoke, the sound sharp with humiliation. Lyra Hale, on behalf of Veltrix Institute, I apologize for the harm inflicted upon you. our ignorance led to a situation we were not prepared for. He bowed his head. We ask for forgiveness. Lyra blinked, stunned by the sight of a being who swore he would never kneel to anyone, much less a human child. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply answered, I accept your apology. A subtle wave of tension drained from the chamber. Zevral rose slowly, his pride wounded, yet his voice steadier than before. You may continue your studies. All restrictions on your movement and attendance are removed. You will be treated like any other student. Lyra nodded. Thank you. But she could feel the shift. Eyes that once held fear now held something more complicated: respect, caution, curiosity. For some, admiration. As she walked out of the council chamber, students who had once stepped away now watched her with quiet awe. A few even bowed their heads in silent acknowledgement. Selvar, her orientation guide, floated to her side. Human Lyra, this outcome is unprecedented. Lyra smiled faintly. For me too. You have changed something here, Selvar said. The Academy will not forget it. Lyra glanced back at the towering council doors. Neither will I. She stepped into the corridor, the weight of the Academy's fear replaced by the beginnings of understanding. Not complete acceptance, not yet, but a future where she wasn't a threat to be contained, but a person to be understood. Humans didn't come to dominate. They came to survive, adapt, and, if given a chance, belong. And for the first time since arriving, Lyra felt like that possibility was finally real. Lyra's life at Veltrix Institute changed overnight. After the council hearing, the constant suspicion that trailed her like a shadow began to fade, not completely, but enough to breathe without feeling like she carried a siren on her back. Still, the echoes of the restraint incident clung to the Academy, whispered in corners and transmitted through personal comms. Her first morning back in class felt strangely quiet. Students no longer scattered at her arrival, though they still kept a respectful distance. Some studied her openly, as if trying to map a creature from a world they had only read about. Others watched discreetly, fascinated by the idea that a human could break a suppression grid without meaning to. Lyra entered the xenobiology lab where the incident had started. The air smelled of sterilized metal and cooling polymers. Professor RHYN lowered its luminous orb-like body when she arrived. Lyra Hale, it said gently, we appreciate your return. I wouldn't leave because of one mistake, Lyra replied. That wouldn't help anyone. A soft ripple of color passed across RHYN's surface. If the Academy intends to understand your species, it will require your cooperation. You have it, Lyra said. Just don't put me in restraints again. Several students chuckled nervously. RHYN extinguished the ambient lights, signaling the start of the lesson. But before it could begin, the door slid open, and Headmaster Zevral entered. The room stiffened. Zevral's steps were measured, every movement precise. His pale carapace gleamed under the lab lights. Lyra met his gaze, expecting coldness or pride lingering beneath the forced apology. Instead, he spoke calmly. Lyra Hale, I request your presence. This is not disciplinary. RHYN dimmed respectfully. We will pause the lesson. Lyra followed Zevral through a corridor lined with crystalline panels. At first, neither spoke. Then Zevral broke the silence with unexpected candor. You are aware, he began, that your hearing did not end the matter. Lyra raised an eyebrow. I assumed there was more. A destroyed suppression grid doesn't disappear from the records. Correct. Zevral's mandibles clicked softly. The Council has ordered a study. They want to understand how humans function at a biological level, not invasive, but thorough. Lyra exhaled. They want tests. Yes, he replied. But they want them supervised by someone who understands your instincts. Someone you trust. Trust? Lyra echoed. After what happened? He slowed his pace. I misjudged you. I acted on fear instead of reason. I won't repeat the error. Lyra didn't reply right away. His sincerity wasn't warm or human-like, it was rigid, formal, but real. "What kind of tests?" she finally asked. "Controlled scenarios," he said. "Reaction timing. Reflex thresholds. Stress responses. We must learn how to design environments where your species is safe, and where others are safe around you." Lyra looked ahead. "And you think I'll agree?" Zevral's tone dropped. "If you don't, misunderstandings will continue. Another incident could end, very differently." That was the truth she couldn't ignore. Not for her sake, she could handle herself, but for the fragile species who had nearly been crushed under a collapsing suppression grid. Lyra nodded slowly. "All right. Let's do it. But on one condition." Zevral stopped walking. "Name it." "No restraints," she said. "No grav-fields. No forceful methods. Everything must be voluntary." He bowed his head with surprising ease. "Accepted." The testing chamber was nothing like the suppression room. Soft lighting, padded flooring, transparent shielding with escape panels, meant not to confine, but to allow quick withdrawal if something went wrong. Several scientists watched from an elevated control station. Zevral stood beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "We begin with a simple assessment. You will catch an object." Lyra frowned. "That's it?" "For now." A small metallic sphere rolled out of a dispenser. It hovered, then launched itself toward her at high speed. She snatched it effortlessly with 2 fingers. The scientists murmured. Again, Zevral instructed. The sphere shot faster. She caught it before it traveled half the distance. One scientist leaned toward another. She tracked that before the sensor registered. "Impossible," a second whispered. Lyra set the sphere down. "Speed isn't the problem," she said. "Restraints are. My body reacts when it feels cornered." "We will test that carefully," Zevral said. "But gradually." They introduced more scenarios. Sudden movements. Loud noises. A simulated approaching threat. Lyra responded quickly but controlled, showing she wasn't unstable, just wired differently. At one point, a loud mechanical clank echoed through the chamber. A panel had jammed. Lyra turned her head sharply, feet shifting into a defensive stance. Zevral raised both hands. Pause. Her muscles released. She took a breath. "That wasn't part of the test, was it?" "No," he said, almost apologetically. "Even our equipment struggles to account for your reaction time." Lyra stepped back. "Now you see why restraints are dangerous." "I do," he replied. "And I see why ignoring your warnings was catastrophic." Hours passed, each test revealing more about her physiology, and more about the gulf between human instincts and gentle world expectations. When the final assessment ended, Zevral approached her with a softened posture. "Lyra Hale, the Council will want a full report. Today you provided clarity we've lacked for generations." Lyra wiped sweat from her brow. "I didn't do it for them. I did it so the next human doesn't go through what I did." Zevral hesitated, then spoke with uncharacteristic humility. "There will be more humans. The Council is opening discussions for expanded exchange programs." Lyra blinked. "More? Already?" "Your case," he said, "forced them to reconsider many outdated assumptions. You have begun something larger than you realize." She felt a shift inside her, something warm, unexpected. The possibility of a future where she wasn't an isolated anomaly, but the first step toward bridging worlds. As they left the chamber, a group of younger students gathered near the entrance. Their eyes were wide, not with fear, but admiration. One small aquatic student timidly approached. Lyra? Could you teach us how you moved so fast today?" Lyra smiled. "It's not about speed. It's about awareness. I can show you that." The student brightened. His companions gathered closer. Zevril watched the scene unfold, a quiet realization settling over him. The girl he once feared might become the Academy's greatest asset. Lyra knelt, demonstrating a simple grounding stance humans use for balance. The students copied her imperfectly but with enthusiasm. As she guided them patiently, the Academy's image of a dangerous Deathworlder dissolved into something new, something hopeful. Zevril spoke softly from behind her. "Lyra Hale, you've done more than survive here. You have reshaped this institute." She stood, meeting his gaze. "I didn't plan that. I just didn't want to be misunderstood." "And yet," he said, "you changed us anyway." Lyra looked across the campus where shadows of fear once followed her steps. Now, light reflected off the crystalline structures with a gentleness she hadn't noticed before. A place that once tried to restrain her was learning to welcome her. And somewhere deep within, a new truth took root, a truth she had carried from Earth but never spoken aloud. Humans don't come to conquer. They come to endure, to learn, and, when given the chance, to lead.